From an early age, my first guest knew she was destined for show business. Today, she uses her storytelling skills to enthrall audiences young and old. Let's meet Pati Kachel.
Hi, Roger.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
I appreciate your coming to the show tonight. You've been telling stories for something like 30 years?
Yes, over 30 now.
Tell us how you got started.
Started out by just listening to my grandmother tell wonderful stories and realized how much it means to people to just connect with memories. So it started out with her and started doing programs at my church, and then they'd invite me out of the places, and before I know it, it became my full-time profession.
Full-time profession.
Yes.
And you're in character tonight. At least I think you may be. Can you tell us about that?
I portray Beatrix Potter, the author and illustrator of The Tales of Peter Rabbit. I go into schools and present her story, and I did a lot of research on her life, went over to England and went to the places where she grew up and lived, and then put all that together in an hour-long program so that the children and teachers can have Beatrix come into their classroom or into their auditorium, and after that experience they feel like they know the artist and the illustrator and maybe want to go home and read those books in their bookshelves a little bit more.
You really bring the authors to life.
I try to.
At least in this case. Can you give us just a little bit of a flavor of how Beatrix Potter would address maybe a class?
Most certainly. I often come into a classroom and I say, many children ask me how I came to write The Tale of Peter Rabbit. Well, it actually began with my own rabbit, whose name was Peter. And I wrote a letter to a small child who was not feeling well, and I thought, I don't know what to write you, so I shall write you a story. And it began, there was once 4 little rabbits, Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. And that was the beginning of my first book, The Tale of Peter Rabbit. And that was the beginning of 26 books and a career as a commercial artist and illustrator and author for her life.
So part of your background on the graphics was with books as well? Or?
Yes.
Very interesting. Now, you mentioned classrooms, we just talked. Tell us, what kind of venues is your storytelling told at?
I do a lot of churches, a lot of women's fellowship groups, Red Hat societies. I've done storytelling in tea rooms and women's retreats. Just where anybody gathers together and likes to hear stories. I have 34 different programs right now on a variety of topics. So if you like stories, contact me and I'll make sure you get one of my brochures that tell all about them.
What would be the most surprising story line that you might present on?
One of my most requested programs is called Conversations with Corrie ten Boom. And Corrie ten Boom was a Dutch Christian who lived during World War II in Holland, and she and her family helped to hide Jews during the war. And she lived a very long life after surviving a concentration camp. I transformed myself to look like an 82-year-old Corrie ten Boom, and I tell her entire story in the first-person narrative style. So I come in looking like 82-year-old lady with silver hair and glasses, and with a Dutch accent, I tell her entire story. And for an hour, I take you back to World War II in Holland.
So you're a one-act show.
I am. I'm a one-woman show.
Very good. And a lot of your research has been on historical female figures. Is it exclusively that, or?
Primarily, I love to tell stories of extraordinary women who use the gifts that God gave them to make the world a better place by one way or another, through their artistic expression or through their gifts of service to other people. So I love to tell stories about Mother Teresa, Helen Keller, Jane Austen. A lot of people don't know about her background and where she came from and what motivated her to write the wonderful novel she did. So by getting behind the scenes and studying their lives and then telling those stories that people don't often have time to explore like I do, hopefully they have a better appreciation for these women after they've heard their stories.
Now, I've seen a lot of Lutheran churches that you've been to. Is it pronounced Lutheran or Lutheran?
I have a program called Ja, sure, I'm a Norwegian Lutheran. And I do a lot of Lutheran churches in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa. And that program is well received because anybody who grew up in a Lutheran Norwegian home like I did totally identifies with all my memories. It's a really fun program to do.
But people can relate to that.
They do. They laugh, and I do too.
In one of your historical figures, people know Martin Luther, or they may.
Yes.
And talk about his wife that you
Yeah,
studied.
everybody knows about Martin and the Reformation, but they don't know that he never could have survived it if he hadn't had a wife behind the scenes making things happen for him. And her name was Katharina von Bora Luther, and we call her Katie. And she was an incredibly gifted woman who gave him a lot of wind beneath his wings to make it through the Reformation. She was actually an ex-nun, and he was an ex-monk who married one another and went on to have a large family.
So an ex-nun and an ex-monk. Oh, very good. What was your most surprising audience, or the most fun?
Many years ago, when I first started out, I was asked to storytell at a Christmas party for the Audrey Club. And in order to belong to the Audrey Club, you have to have the name of Audrey. So I went into this room that was filled with about 200 people, young and old, and everyone in the audience was named Audrey. And it was the first time I remembered everybody's name in the audience.
I wish we had more time just to talk about your characters. We didn't even touch on the Parable Fund. That'll be up on the monitor in just a little bit, but I do appreciate your coming this evening.
Thanks for having me, Roger.
Very interesting talking with you.
Thank you.